America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold. It's patriotism, its morality, and its spirituality. If we can undermine these three areas, America will collapse from within. This quote has been attributed to Joseph Stalin. We are on the verge of such an internal collapse in our country. But I believe that what we so proudly hailed at twilight's last gleaming can remain through the night and once again appear by the dawn's early light. Over 2,000 years ago, Jesus declared us to be the salt of the earth. Now the ancients, they used to taste their salt to see if it still had flavor to it. They knew that if it was tasteless, that it was no longer good for keeping their food from spoiling. Salt is a preservative. It is meant to slow down the process of decay. And that is what we are to be doing in America. We are to be preserving America and slowing down the process of decay. Sociologist Robert Bellah said that the values of a whole culture may be changed when only 2% of its people have a new vision. Now I'm asking you today to be part of that 2% with a new vision, a new strategy for preserving America. I hope to show you that the answer to arresting the internal decay in our country lies in large part with a focus on the three areas I mentioned earlier. Now, I want to start with the most important area, America's spirituality. In the 1830s, the French political thinker Alexis de Tocqueville came to America and then when he went back, he recorded his observations in America. And in the book that he wrote, Democracy in America, he confessed, "It was not until I went to the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. America is great because she is good, and if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great." Now, his own country should have listened to his observations, but they didn't. Instead, in 1878, the Socialist Party tried to banish the thoughts of God from the young people by passing a law that removed all mention of religion from the school textbooks. When the next census was taken, there was an appalling increase in juvenile crime, and especially in child suicide. So the French government hired a serious freethinker to study the problem. And his resulting book, called Crime and the School, traced the evil back to the profound soul discouragement of a child who knew not God. America has seen similar results with its own anti-God experiment of the last 60 years. In the early 60s, first prayer and then the Bible was removed from our schools. And all you need to do is check the government statistics, the secular government statistics since then, to see of our own appalling increase in evils such as violent crime, rape, murder, and child abuse. Now, we took God away from our children, and part of restoring America is to give God back to our children. And we have to start in our homes, not the schools. Considering that only 23% of Christians in the United States become believers after the age of 21, it is vital that we evangelize our own children. But how many parents today see their home as their greatest mission field? The average American today owns 3 copies of the Bible, but doesn't read any of them. Spurgeon once said, "We deeply want a revival of family religion. How can we hope to see the kingdom of our Lord advance when his own disciples do not teach his gospel to their own children?" The spiritual transformation of America must begin in our homes. It must begin with opening our Bibles and teaching them to our children. Now, the second area of resistance that was mentioned in that quote is the morality. But today in America, traditional morality has been replaced with relativism, and the idea that we can be moral agents in society without religion and without God. George Washington prophesied of such an idea when he said, "Reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle." Benjamin Rush agreed with him and said that without religion there is no virtue, and without virtue there is no liberty. Benjamin Franklin himself spoke of the importance of training youth up in virtue. He said that bad habits and vices of mind, being like diseases of the body, are more readily prevented than cured. The scriptures, of course, need to be the foundation of all moral training in our homes. But what else can we do? Well, there's an ageless method of how free people instill virtue without force. And this method is by wrapping the character trait that they hope to develop, wrapping it in a story. Now, if we combine the teaching of the scriptures and the Bible with such stories that stir the moral imagination, that is the first step we need to take to change the moral climate in America. And then we can be like the pilgrim parents of old, who were said to have brought up their families in sturdy virtue and a living faith in God, without which nations perish. Now, the third and last area of healthy resistance that I'd like to bring up is that of the patriotism. This is an area that many people might not think is as important today in America, but is it? For those who are not sure, I'd like to share a story. During World War I, the French fought the invading Germans for 4 long years. But only 20 years later, during World War II, the French fell to the Nazis in just 6 weeks. So what had changed in France? Most of the blame was put on the teachers' unions, because they had changed the school, the books, and they had removed all the stories of the courage and the sacrifice of the French fallen heroes. And they had replaced them with stories of the horrors of war and the suffering of both the German and the French soldiers. Karl Marx once said that a people without a heritage are easily persuaded. Now, a single twig can easily be broken, but not so with a bunch of twigs united together. The shared heritage of the United States is what makes us strong. But colleges today are robbing our young people of this heritage. Professor Thompson of Ashland University said, "By debunking the principles and great deeds of the American past, and by dethroning our most cherished heroes, today's college professors are destroying in youth the natural reverence and patriotism, a patriotic attachment that is vital to the civic health of any regime. A nation that hates itself cannot last." And it's not just in colleges, in high schools, elementary schools. Our history books are being revised. They're leaving out such profound stories that children used to be taught in their history books. Stories such as that of Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys. When they went to surprise Fort Ticonderoga, they demanded the surrender of the fort. And the commander asked, "By whose authority do you..." And Ethan Allen interrupted and said, "In the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress do I command you to surrender." They were met with no resistance, and all the ammunition fell into America's hands. Have you ever heard that story? Or how about the story about the Battle of Monongahela, in which every officer but Washington was shot down? George Washington later wrote a letter to his brother John, and he shared about God's protection and how 4 bullets had gone through his coat, and 2 horses were shot from under him. But in all this, he remained unhurt, even while death fell to his companions all around him. 15 years later, George Washington was going through the very woods where that battle took place and met the Indian chief that was there that day, and spoke to him through an interpreter. And the Indian chief told him that day he had ordered his braves to let their aim be certain, and Washington would die. But it was all in vain. The Indian chief said, "A power mightier than we shielded you." And then the Indian chief prophesied about George Washington. He will become the chief of nations, and a people yet unborn will hail him as founder of a mighty empire. These are stories we are not taught in school anymore. These are the stories we need to read and share with our children. And we need to teach our children to honor our heroes. Kimberly Fletcher wrote, "They pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to fight for freedom. Some lost their lives. Many lost their fortunes. But it wasn't until my generation that they lost their sacred honor." We need to teach our children about America's Christian heritage and honor. May we look at our flag and let it remind us of these threefold resistance. The white stars on the blue field remind us of heaven and the importance of America's spirituality. The white stripes remind us of the importance of America's purity and morality, and the red stripes to remind us of the blood that was shed, that was spilled, and the honor that we need to show our heritage once again. And once again be a patriotic people. What our country needs is a new birth in spirituality, morality, and patriotism. God bless America.